engineering the future I want? And I sort of looked at the I as my personal view. So please, it's my perspective, and it's really where I think some of the indicators from an industry and certainly from life are taking us, but certainly it gives you my perspective in terms of engineering and our future. So I thought in doing this, I would start off with, why did I choose engineering? You know, what was it that drove me into this career? I'll run through some statistics and challenges we're facing, and certainly in terms of the CESA platform, how we're addressing that, so I'll try and keep that as brief as possible. Transformation, I think that's, a lot has been said about transformation, but I'd like to give you again my perspective on transformation, and certainly the transformation agenda we're going along. Digital disruption, and in terms of how we are how we're preparing to embrace that. And then lastly, hopefully, what will be the, what do I consider as being the future that I would like to see from an engineering perspective. So aside from the CV that was read out, and I didn't know that was going to happen, I thought I'll share with you who I am. I'm 47 years old, so just missed the cutoff for the YPs. Schooled in Chatsworth in Durban. Married my high school girlfriend, Kavanagh. Have a son who's 22 and a daughter who's 20, Kimran and Savini. And importantly, received a bursary from Van Wyk and Low. And you know, going back to those days, this is now it was in my standard 9 year, so forgive me, I don't work with those grades and things, I'm still in the standards. I received this bursary, and in those days, it was really, engineering was not a career of choice, certainly not in the communities that I lived in. So that being said, I'm a first generation engineer, certainly in my family, but certainly within my community. The norm was, you know, being a school teacher, being a doctor, being a lawyer, being an accountant. You know, coming from Indian heritage, being an accountant, yeah, you know, you've got to follow that route. So receiving this bursary from Van Wyk and Low was a great opportunity. It was, you know, and for those of you who don't know, Van Wyk and Low has evolved over time and has become Oricon as we know it and understand it today. So matriculated in 1988 and finished my degree in 1992. Fast forward, 1992, you had seen, you know, a few years earlier, you'd seen Madiba released from prison, you'd seen the new government and the new wings, or the changes starting to appear. But here's this Indian kid from Chatsworth, stationed, or immediately on graduating, receives his letter of employment from Van Wyk and Low to be stationed in Pretoria. And I can tell you the emotion that goes through, because suddenly you're now cast into, remember in those days Pretoria was almost going back into a big bad world that you didn't have a perspective on. And remember, I hadn't traveled out of Durban. In fact, Durban was all I knew. Okay, so took up my offer in January or 3rd of January, I think it was, in Pretoria. And again, your stereotypes of what you believe and what you anticipate, suddenly you start realizing that all those things that you had built up in your mind, unless you start looking at things for yourself and start experiencing things for yourself, you have all these things and these biases. I moved into Pretoria. Firstly, was dead scared about living in Pretoria, so I lived in Joburg and traveled every day to Pretoria. Only reason was there was a few other people within my family that lived in Joburg, so it was almost a little bit more acceptable that others had lived in Joburg, so maybe it's safe. So lived in Joburg, traveled to Pretoria, and wow, 1993, similarities between the Afrikaner culture and the Indian family type of setup, again, took me completely by storm. Complete, all of the stereotypes and all of these pictures that I had in my mind, I had to reevaluate. Anyway, In all of this while, Kavanagh, my current wife, or my wife now, my girlfriend then, was living in Durban. So there was this big drive to how quickly could I get back to Durban. Now, Van Wyk & Lowe in those days was a national company, so first thing I went was, can I get a transfer to Durban? No, not enough work, or, there was always an excuse. So during the course of 1993, I worked with, I'm a transportation engineer. I found my professor in Durban University, and he managed to secure a scholarship through the Department of Transport to do a project, but at the same time do my master's. The only thing that really intrigued me about this was I could choose the university I was to study at. So lo and behold, where did I move? Correct. So it was, I went back, did my master's, moved back to KZN, became a full-time student, got married in that time, and all of those things. And again, fast forward, came back up to Pretoria. Another turning point in my life was joined a small, left Van Wyk & Lowe, or at that point Africon, in 1997, and joined a startup company. PD Naidu and Associates was roughly about 15 people when I joined them. And in those days, Van Wyk & Lowe at that point, or Africon at that point in time, was probably about 2,500 people operating across the country. And again, another stereotype in my family, as soon as I said this to my family, you're leaving a secure job to go and take a chance. And did that, joined Dempsey and Ali, two huge influences and mentors in my life. And we started, I became a founder director within that team, and we grew PD Naidu and Associates. And through that process, I was involved in CESA. Dempsey was president of CESA in and around 2003. The YPF was launched in October, sometime in October 2004. That's the SASI YPF. It wasn't CESA. And I was one of its founding chairpersons at that stage. So fast forward from 2004, 14 years later, I have managed to achieve the honor of serving our industry and representing all of you. And for me, that's a huge honor, because it gives me an opportunity to represent some of my thoughts, but hopefully the thoughts of our industry at large. And that's what I intend doing in this presidency, and that's what I've been trying to do. So hopefully in that process, it will take us as an industry forward. In 2013, we decided, for various reasons, and not many people know this, but we grew PD Naidu and Associates to about 650 people. And I know that there's a huge focus on corruption, there's a huge focus on leadership and so on. And being a black organization, having grown our business, where the cornerstone to our business principles was ethics. Was our stance on corruption, was our stance on bribery, was our stance in terms of working hard and really being forthright about our beliefs. And we always punched above our weight. The joke in the industry was, when PD Naidu and Associates was 50, we told everybody we were 250. When we were 650, we told everybody we were 2,000. And we always did that. But that was a simple sort of marketing stint. We always delivered on the basis, or we always drove the business on the basis of delivery. And one of my founder directors, Sham Singh, from the Durban office in those days, he always said to me, Neresh, your best marketing tool is the last job you've done. And that's very, very good advice in terms of deliver, deliver, deliver. And that's how we ran PDNA. And what drove us to sell the business? We got, Mott MacDonald came knocking on our doors in 2007. We turned them away. But the drive and the pressure in terms of using PDNA as a vehicle for corrupt means became more and more apparent. We were being solicited from bribery to corrupt activities to political requests, left, right, and center, to the point where it almost became an escape. And in fact, it was an escape. Notwithstanding the fact that we joined a fantastic company, it was an accolade for us to be approached by a global business like Mott MacDonald in 2007 already. And in 2007, we were a small business. But in 2013, we moved on. We were about 650 at about that time. And we had the chance to sell the business. It was a means of escaping the current climate that we are. Now, the reason I tell you this is because as young engineers, and I would imagine many of you young entrepreneurs, the draw to starting your own business or to working in businesses and being susceptible to these kinds of approaches is always going to be there. So don't kid yourself. Society, I think Renata said there's, polarity? There's good and bad always. So you're always going to get the call for doing something or to try and cut a corner or to try and get somewhere fast. And you need to ensure that the basis for your existence is grounded on certain values. And one of those values from my perspective, and certainly what I've done before I get there, I've really kept my values based on humility, honesty, having lots of fun, enjoying what I do, and certainly working hard. Now, it might not be everybody's cup of tea, but at the end of the day, and at the end of each day, I sleep easy because the decisions I have made in terms of my value system, I'm comfortable with. And I share that message with you, and I share that story because it gives you an insight into who I am, but also gives you an insight into some of the lessons I've learned along the way. So why did I choose engineering? And I thought the best way to illustrate that is, and hopefully this will work, is to try and play you a video. If any fact is twisted or falsified, it's referred to as doctored. On the other hand, if a task is accomplished skillfully, it's called engineered. So in terms of CESA, and I mean, again, a plug from our industry organization, we represent about 563 odd member companies, and I'm going to scroll quickly through this, but I think the important thing is it's organizations like CESA that stand for credibility, that stand for ethics, that stand for quality, and so on and so on. And the more we become vigilant about companies operating in our space, and certainly unashamedly, we use CESA as an organization and platforms like this and various other platforms to push our industry forward in terms of generating prosperity, to challenge various elements that are posing as either threats or problems to our industry, and aspire to be credible. And we need to be vocal about these. We need to bring it to organizations like CESA, and certainly to government organizations like Treasury and so on. Because unless we start taking out, and I'm going to use this word loosely, fly-by-nights in our industry, the opportunity for good organizations to grow this industry credibility become limited. And that's what CESA is going to try and achieve in our mandates going forward. So I put this slide up because I like this slide. Our current procurement processes drive us into, misinterprets the word cost effective, and drives us into lowest cost. And I think that's an area from a professional point of view, an industry point of view, that actually drives us away from the very essence of what we studied to do. It's about finding value-add solutions. It's about adding value to people's lives. That video showed you how engineers add value. And, tendering for work on the lowest cost basis really drives our industry on the basis of looking, and the significance of this here, it's the smallest element of the life cycle of an asset in terms of cost. But yet our procurement rules and processes drive us to compete on elaborate tender schemes and so on. Whereas we should be getting the best brains, the best skills, the best expertise to ensure that we use that to maximize the opportunity and minimize the negative aspects, make the asset work as best as possible and get the best possible solution for both your construction and your operations and maintenance. So that's a big driver for us. And again, a couple of stats. Average discounting by firm. At the turn of the century, from 2007, this has progressively moved from about 15% to about 30% currently. But more importantly, if you look at our monies owed to companies, at the turn of the century, this was roughly about 10% of companies' turnovers were outstanding for more than 3 months. As we stand today, it's about closer to 30%. Now, all of these things are causing industry challenges. All of these things are making it more and more difficult. I know Amanda said, great to see 2 times as many people here. But there should be more than that. Companies should be affording more and more opportunities in terms of training, more and more opportunities in terms of bettering ourselves, more and more opportunities in terms of network and engaging in meaningful dialogue. But the truth of the matter, and working in a consultancy, you do the best you can under the commercial terms you've got to sustain. So, at the moment, in as much as we're critical about companies not being able to afford more people to be at these platforms, our industry is in dire straits. And that's led to retrenchments, there's downsizing, we spoke about training. The cycle is a never-ending cycle. The call for you youngsters and certainly old practitioners to emigrate and leave our shores is there. Other places have huge opportunities. And then also the migration away from our industry into the banking sector and the financial sector and the management consulting sector. And all that this does is it leads to a reduced competency in our industry, both from a client point of view as well as consultancy point of view. So it's a never-ending spiral, and it's one that we need to actually address. So in terms of our key objectives for this year, we really looked at our procurement challenges, our balanced workload, and our client competency. But this is not meant to be an address on what we're doing at CESA, but these are the current things that we're focusing on. So transformation. I said I would speak a little bit about transformation. At CESA, and the last few weeks have been topical to say the least, with all of social media and everybody abuzz with debate that have covered stats and covered facts and figures and studies and so on. And at CESA, we also have a position in terms of our transformation agenda. What we've built on this year, and certainly steadily over the last few years, is move our transformation agenda from purely the demographic and addressing our social imbalances to being a lot more broad-based, a lot more far-ranging, because we believe transformation is just more, a lot more than just focusing on the racial divide or the social imbalances. It covers the gender diversity issue. It covers the age issue. It covers the business models and operating under different business structures. And certainly, it covers the technology question. And unless we equip ourselves on all of those fronts as an industry, we can't continuously look at ourselves as an industry from a South African point of view, because in as much as you're competing in South Africa with 560 other companies, you're competing globally with hundreds of thousands of consulting engineers. When you compare the amount of engineers that China produces and the amount of engineers that India produces and other mature markets around the world. And with the digital age, the world has become a small, small place. So unless we as an industry start embracing these sorts of changes, and focus on a much broader range of transformation agenda items, I think we'll be missing an opportunity. Now, why do we need to do this? I said the world has changed, the world is becoming a smaller place. But if you look at the stats, our global population has changed from the 1800s, from about 1 billion in 1800 to about 7.6 billion currently. Now, this just gives you a breakdown, but the important thing to take into consideration is that bottom number, roughly 120,000 births a day. That means 120,000 people. So to put it in perspective, let's call it 2 times a stadium of Soccer City, filled with people, are entering the world each day. And that's the demand on resources, the demand on utilities, the demand for engineering, the demand for solutions, the demand for their right to exist. And that's why, in terms of embracing technology and new ways of doing things, we have got to up our game as engineering. And I'll show you a few more stats in terms of going forward. This is just a clip in terms of our current resource strain and the fact that there's a migration of lots and lots of people moving to our big cities. It's like me moving all those years back from Durban to what was the land of opportunity in Gauteng, or the place of gold, Igoli. Similar sort of concept, but imagine that a few thousand-fold more. That's what we face in the current age. Now, so what does this future hold in terms of digital disruption? It's on our doorstep, it's here. And I know I get criticized in that South Africa's got lots of problems and we've got to focus on all the other problems. But we've got to take cognizance of what's happening in the world around us. At the moment, if we don't, we become irrelevant, and certainly we become an industry that's not paid respect to or taken seriously. And in terms of going forward, I mean, these are some of the things. Now, importantly, it's about using appropriate technology for appropriate purposes. Now, I specifically put the MEC's picture on the drones up here. And my view is one, not that I'm anti-drones and not that I'm anti-technology. So let me say that up front. But I do believe that the problem in terms of managing our infrastructure budget is a lack of skills. So no matter how many drones you fly and no matter how many sites you go and visit with drones, it depends on how many people you've got and how much skills you've got interpreting the data you get back. Okay? So again, appropriate use, great idea, and I laud the MEC for thinking futuristically, but it's got to be appropriate for the situation we find ourselves in. I used this anecdote in Durban, I think, so forgive me if I say it again. It's like saying to people, we can fix our public transport by issuing everybody with smart cards. We'll use technology, we'll give you all smart cards so you can ride the bus, the taxi, and all means of public transport. And if we do that, we'll get everybody to migrate to public transport. The problem is not the smart card. The problem is public transport. We need to fix our problems first. So I put that up there not to take a dig at the MEC, but certainly it's about using the right technology for the right purposes. And I believe from a South African perspective, and you'll see it later on, we have a skills issue. We don't, so it's a skills and a competence and an expertise issue. And again, you would have read in the newspaper, in fact, I think it was last week or the week before, the Minister of Cocta announced, I think, 80 or 100 skilled practitioners being employed in various municipalities. Great, right step. But again, it's not going to help if we employ graduate engineers without the necessary training and expertise to go and do those jobs. And it's those sorts of things. So people cotton on to an idea and run with it, blindly without working out all of the consequences, both intended and unintended. So the use of artificial intelligence, data, the use of embedded sensors in infrastructure, all of these things are happening right now. 3D printing, 5D modeling in terms of BIM, managing our documents and our document control and working seamlessly across continents, let alone offices, are all on our doorstep currently. Now, I said in a mature world, this slide is applicable to technology and technology alone. In our world, it's applicable to both technology and skills. Our projects run on for a lot longer, and our projects cost a lot more, both in terms of the skills employed in client bodies as well as the technology used. The big point here is the amount of R&D that we're spending, the budget we allocate into R&D in terms of the construction sector. And that, you'll see, is woefully short of our competitors, resulting in, if you compare our productivity in terms of construction over the last, 8 years, has stayed relatively stable, in fact has dropped a little bit, versus the manufacturing sector that have embraced technology, certainly invested in terms of technology and R&D, and you can see the productivity has almost doubled. Now, what does that mean? In terms of the comparison, the digital comparison, in as much as we're far behind our associated industries or other sectors, we do have an opportunity. We have an opportunity to leapfrog and learn from mistakes made elsewhere, and certainly from technologies that have been enhanced and established elsewhere. And this is, using route mapping in terms of the transport and logistics. That sort of technology can be used in terms of programming and scheduling. In terms of the pharmaceutical sector, which basically has spent a lot in terms of predictive analysis, again, a lot of that technology can be applied in terms of finding the best path or the critical assessment for both construction and consultant services. And certainly using supply chain optimization that has been honed in the retail sector to make it applicable to us in the construction sector. So ultimately, what would we like to get to is to get to a project cycle that seamlessly knits all of these elements together, from the high definition mapping through to the digital tools and modeling in 5D BIM type design, through to collaborating digitally from across the world, let alone across the offices in a paperless manner, through to using artificial intelligence, and I spoke about sensors embedded, so you're getting real-time information on the basis of optimizing performance, optimizing usage, and making sure that solutions are being iteratively determined as assets operate. And then future-proofing using materials that are not the norm, changing the norm in terms of looking at materials in terms of composition, strength, and property, all to give us a future look at where our sector and our industry goes. So, are we ready? Are we ready to cohabitate our spaces with machinery and robots? And I know a lot of us are fearful of this, because it does mean that things like job losses, job uncertainty, all creep into the equation. I don't have any stats to put up. And when I was trying to find stats, I found about 30 references, and none of them could give me a conclusive answer. Will automation and technology cause job losses or cause greater jobs? And the only thing I could parallel it with was the agricultural space in the years gone by, as we've moved out into our current environment, into the industrial age, is that the move from farming in terms of labor-intensive techniques and jobs, and the jobs available in terms of the industrialized world, went up fourfold. And that's the only thing we can benchmark to. Not to say that that's going to be a measure of will we have more jobs in the future or won't we. But I do think the crux of that discussion is going to be in terms of our education levels. It's going to be in terms of our literacy levels and our ability to reinvent, retool, reskill ourselves. Any of you have listened to the radio recently, but Morningside Pharmacy has a robot for those of you from Joburg or Gauteng, Morningside Pharmacy has a robot dispensing pharmaceuticals. Right now, today. Okay? So this is happening, guys. So what is the future I would like to see? Certainly a balance and shared skill levels between client and service providers, mutual respect for our engineering professionals between client and service provider, value for money procurement systems by accounting fair compensation and affording value-based, taking account of value as opposed to time, adequate planning and stability in terms of being able to plan well in advance to cut off the highs and lows that our industry sees, collaborative working between client, engineer, contractor, with the sole purpose of our existence being delivering projects successfully, not fighting with each other in terms of what contract do I have and how much money can I get more than the next person, or how much better I can make myself look. And then lastly, embrace change. Don't fear it, because I think that gives us an opportunity. Thank you. Yeah, sure.
Any questions?
So this is a comment actually on the also look that when you were asking about, not asking, is this on? So you were saying you looked at literature on, or sort of research on whether there'll be job losses or gains in the future with the incoming fourth generation. So what I've found is that it's almost sort of a balance, not an equal balance as such of the two. There will be job losses, of course, in some sectors, and there will be increases in other sectors, and the most common trend in all those researches is that there will be a rising there will be an increasing need for women to in that generation as a result of certain traits that they possess that will be necessary to operate certain machineries or processes.
The literature from McKinsey to various organizations talk about job losses, but also talk about job gains, and I mean, all of, you can check it. You can Google this and say, will there be job losses based on technology? And there's about 30 or 40 references, and no two give the same number. So it's not a definitive. It's really like that Star Trek movie, entering into, what's it called? You see, I'm showing my age now. Beyond and entering the beyond, or something like that. But yes, I think it's in terms of the world of technology and automation, it'll be the social and emotive skills that will be honed, because a machine can't replace that. So repetitive tasks will certainly be stuff that will be done by robots and machines, but it's the thinking and the social and the networking and the relating to other humans and determining the need that will still have to be done by us. And I think it'll give us more time to do those things. So coming back to Renata's question about the work-life balance, maybe that will achieve a work-life balance. I don't know.
Yeah, thank you for that. It was quite enlightening. I've just got a few comments, well, one comment and a question. You know, in terms of technology, I think it's quite a critical, transformation element that obviously should not be denied. But in actually looking at, our specific country and the fact that we are still a developing nation, I mean, we've just had shocking stats that in the last quarter, employment figures are looking very good. I'm just thinking in that, look, in terms of actually, dissecting the technology, you'd probably have to, consider technology that basically seeks to promote employment, and you do get, unfortunately, destructive technology in terms of, our needs that would probably destroy, that employment and actually create, obviously, another problem. A question is, in terms of you having moved, obviously you said in 1997, you moved from Oricon to PDNA, and you started something there. You mentioned something that's actually manifesting itself quite, drastically through the construction industry and obviously possibly the consulting industry. But it's an element of bribery, and I just wanted to know in terms of, okay, you as an organization, and basically back then, how did you actually deal with such things? I mean, were there platforms in which, because I mean, in any event, bribery is an act of criminality. So what steps, were taken in actually trying to actually address that, or, did you have a, what do you call this, corruption hotline? Did you snitch, so to speak, consultants? My biggest concern is that I'm not sure how many, of the candidates here are part of any emerging consultants. Well, it was good and well because there was still a boom in 1997 because, we had just, gone into a new dispensation. But it appears as though, the main focus is basically on, what did you say? It was Van Wyk and Low, which became Oricon, and, basically which were benefiting from the previous regime. And, just with the name change, there seems to be a culture of actually honing those established enterprises. So I don't know, in terms of your organization, what are you doing, or how are you including your emerging enterprises? Because I think that's very critical in terms of actually sustaining the industry. Thank you.
So firstly, let me say that I'm not a technology buff, so I'm no technology expert. In fact, I'm probably what I would call a digital dinosaur. Okay, so that's the first disclaimer I want to put out there. But your question in terms of, in 1997, I just want to sketch a picture for you. When PDNA started in '86, and in fact, Chris Campbell joined PDNA before I did. In fact, Chris Campbell was probably one of the first employees within PDNA, right? So this goes back to the late '80s, and in the 90s, which is when PDNA really grew as a consultancy. Yes, we had the new dispensation of 1994, but in those days we didn't have BBBEE. We didn't have any policies of encouraging, in as much as we were afforded an opportunity to be appointed as a consultant. There was no policies that you have today in terms of EMEs and QSEs and targeted procurement and so on. We did all of those things because it was good for business. So let me also not stand here and speak to you from the perspective that we were in business to make money. We were commercially minded, we were entrepreneurial, and we saw an opportunity in terms of being a black-owned company in the new dispensation, now having opportunities to get into areas that we were not able to pre-1990. So let me put that on record. The one thing we did differently, though, is we went into those avenues with skilled professionals. We accepted that engineering is a skilled profession. So all of the people that we employed, and by virtue of my sort of growth in PDNA and being part of the management structure, our view was always, what can you do from an engineering point of view? Yes, I might have employed you because we had a job to design the Nelson Mandela Bridge, but what next? Well, I might have employed you because we were designing Soccer City, but what next? So it was always, what skill do you bring into the organization? And we grew our business by virtue of acquisition, organic growth, and really assembling people that want to make a difference. So in as much as we were entrepreneurs, we had a social conscience, we wanted to make money, we wanted to make a difference in all of those things. Corruption. We just said no. And we felt the wrath of that no, because every client we said no to, we had an approach from a client saying, well, actually I've got a son that needs to go to university, can you pay his fees? I could easily have said, no problem, I'll give him a bursary. But we refused to do that because there's a gray area there. And for us, ethics is always a gray area. There's a right and a wrong, and that middle band, which is very, very big, is the gray area. And we just said, we stay away from the gray area. So it meant that in 2001, we won a very, very lucrative contract called Blue IQ for Gauteng government. And we advised them on their capital spend, together with Deloitte and a few other companies. And through that contract came Cradle of Humankind, came the Braamfontein upgrade. There's a whole lot of projects. It was really about injecting impetus into the economy. But I want to fast forward. We won that contract. We were then successful in the renewal of that contract, a tender that went out, which we tendered for and won. But by virtue of not wanting to play ball with the then Gauteng government, we were blacklisted. We won the contract in 2006. We had that contract from 2006, so-called, for 4 years. We did no work for Gauteng government. It's the biggest black organization in 2005 in the country. PD Naidu and Associates did not work for Gauteng. Why? Because we just said, sorry, we refuse to do business contrary to our principles. So it's about staying true to your purpose, and there was no corruption watch, there was no, I couldn't report it and so on. And then your last thing, sorry, in terms of CESA, what are we doing in terms of emerging companies? It's about creating a platform for smaller companies to learn from the mistakes that are made from the PDNAs and the Africans and the Oricons and the BKSs and the Mott McDonalds. So it's about partnering companies together. It's about using our practice notes and our quality systems and documentation to leapfrog as opposed to make the same mistakes we've made. So CESA provides you that platform. And the last thing I want to say is there's a place for startups, entrepreneurial companies, small companies, and big companies. And so having been on both sides of that fence, I can't tell you, it's really up to you and your personal belief and your personal drive. Because at different times in your life, you need different things.